What's up, everybody? My name is Shannon and I am still waiting for my Satyr. Today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the solo novelization by Mur Lafferty. So obviously this video is going to have lots of spoilers in it, not only for the book but also for the movie. So if you haven't read this book or if you haven't seen the movie, I would suggest that you check those out first. However, if you just want to know what you want to know so that you can just move on with your life, then welcome to this video. So what's amazing about this book that I talked about in my review of this book is that it really expands all of the characters. We get so much more characterization. We get to go so much more in depth. We really get to see into everybody's heads, and it fixes a lot of the problems with the movie, because a lot of people were saying that this movie just fell flat in terms of like the characters. It doesn't really feel like a team. It doesn't feel like this found family type of thing. The way the marketing was always showing it was that like, oh, we're gonna like build this like big shot gangster putting together a crew, and like we're gonna love everybody and we're gonna find a family. And the movie itself doesn't really feel like that. It just kind of feels like we're pulling in all of these threads that we expect to see in a Han Solo movie, and it just sort of plays out. However, in this book, we get so much more in the characters' heads that you really feel for everything, and honestly, it is such a pain train, and there is a lot of tea, which I'm very excited to talk about with you guys. So the first thing I want to talk about is Beckett not mourning Val. This was a huge problem that I had in particular with the film. It's that Val dies very early on in the movie, and we don't really get much of her, which is a shame because Thandie Newton is amazing. But then Beckett, who's supposedly like in love with her, doesn't really show any emotion or mourn at all. And that could just be that he's like in shock, but in the film, they really gloss over it. However, in this book, we finally get to see what's going through his head. And what we do see is that he is in incredible shock. This is a man who now has like nothing else to lose and is just not knowing what to do with himself. He's just desperately trying to move on. He's in so much pain over losing Val, and it shadows everything that he does throughout the rest of this book, and that is so needed. All they had to do was put in a line from Beckett saying, "I didn't even get a chance to mourn her," and that would have immediately fixed everything. But in this book, we actually get to see in his perspective. We get to see him screaming when he realizes that she's gone, and you feel it. It makes it so much more believable, and it makes this character have so much more depth. Another character who really gets a lot of depth as well is Kira. Now, her character does get expanded a lot in the book Most Wanted by Ray Carson. That takes place entirely before Solo. That's kind of her and Han in the White Worms, kind of seeing how their relationship sort of formed, their dynamic, all of that kind of stuff. So we do get to learn about her and more about who she is. But in this book, you actually get to learn what happens to her when Han leaves her behind. You actually get to learn what goes on, like what went through her head. Like, she was sold to like a slaver. She was then sold to like Dryden Voss, who made her kill for him. He was very abusive to her, and this has all left so many scars on her, to the point where she's talking to L3 in this amazing scene that I really wish we had gotten in the movie. But she's talking to L3 and she's telling her backstory, and L3 asks her, it's like, what would you do if you were free? And Kira tells her, and she feels like this is the right answer. She's like, well, it'd be like a caged bird that like finally saw that the door was open. I would fly and I would be free. But then at the end of the book, as the end of the movie, when she kills Dryden Voss, she doesn't fly out of the cage because she doesn't know how to be free. This is the only life that she's ever known, to the point where she believes that she's more free if she stays than if she leaves. And that is so heart-wrenching and so amazing, and obviously I think that's going to come back a little bit in episode 9 when we finally get to see a little bit more Ben Solo stuff. So that was just really fascinating to me. Now let's back up and talk about this scene with Kira and L3. So in the movie, we see them on the Falcon. They talk about like their boy problems, and we get to hear like L3 talk about how, you know, human and cyborg relations, you know, it works, that kind of stuff. Well, in the book, yes, that does happen, but then they go into a lot more of like their backstories and where they are, and they find out that they have a lot in common. And even Kira, when she first meets L3, reflects on that. Like, this is a droid who like is very independent. She is very much her own droid. She did build herself, like she built herself up from nothing and realized that she doesn't have to be beholden to anybody. She doesn't have to be anybody's slave. And Kira recognizes this right off the bat and really admires her for it. So in this scene, Kira is finally expressing her backstory. She's finally talking about what happened to her. And L3 says, "You're what they made you, but you've made yourself too." And I absolutely love that line, and it also calls back to a line that we get from her in Last Shot by Danielle Older, which was, "We are our own makers," and it just completely blows my mind. I love L3's story so much, and I really love the parallel lines that they draw in this book between her and Kira, because like L3 then asks her, it's like, where is your restraining bolt? Like, what is keeping you from being free? And Kira thinks that like that's what she wants, that she wants to be free, but then at the end of this book she realizes that she doesn't know how to be. So she's just like L3, she doesn't have a restraining bolt, but she's still beholden to masters. It may be on her own terms, but she cannot fully break free of it. She cannot fully be independent. And it was just a really great scene to have, and I really wish that could have been in the movie. I kind of understand why it wasn't. I feel like that could have thrown the pacing of the movie off just a little bit, but I'm so glad that we got it in some sort of fashion because it was definitely deserved. Before we move on to the last thing that I really want to talk about in depth, I do want to bring up Han in this book and just how stubbornly optimistic he is, and just how it is focused on that all he cares about is Kira. Like, he talks about how he doesn't have a family or he doesn't have people, but the closest thing he has to that is Kira. That's all he ever wants. He defines his life as parsecs away from Kira. So when he finally meets her again and she tells him like, I've changed and you haven't, it's kind of devastating to him, and he has to really like grapple with this and come to terms with the fact that Kira is not that same person that he left behind on Corellia. Like, she actually says to him, did you expect me to wait for you forever? I didn't even have the chance to wait before. I was just trying to survive being passed from owner to owner. I'm not a droid you left behind, turned off with nothing happening to it until you came back to turn me on. And he really struggles with that because I don't think he really put much thought into what could have happened to her. He thought she would still be on Corellia waiting for him, and he feels so alone by the end of this book because he doesn't really have anybody. But then he does get Chewbacca, and him and Chewbacca's friendship in this builds so beautifully, and it actually surprisingly has a lot of foreshadowing to what happens in Aftermath Life Debt, because in that Chewie wants to go and like free the Wookiees on Kashyyyk. Like, that's all he's ever wanted, and in this book that's where that like starts. Chewie feels like he needs to free his people, he needs to help his people, and the reason he doesn't on Kessel, like, he finds them and he could go with them, the reason he doesn't go with the other Wookiees is because he feels like the human needs him. Like, Han needs him to stay, he needs somebody, and Chewie decides, you know, like, we have created this bond and I'm going to stay with you, I'm going to help you, and that's just absolutely beautiful. So I feel like their relationship also builds really, really well in this book. So the last thing I want to talk about is a little bit more with L3 and her integrating with the Falcon. This was absolutely heartbreaking when this happens. Her death is so tragic in this book because you see what it does to Lando, and it really does mirror, like I said before, like with Beckett losing Val, it feels very much the same because Lando really cared about L3. Lando loved her. She was his co-pilot, and he has to watch her die, and he wants more than anything not to lose her. Like, that's why he was like very on board with putting her in the ship. He knew that that's not what she would have wanted, and he knew that, like, yes, they needed her to get out of like that Kessel run and get out away from the Maw and all that stuff, but he didn't want to lose her, and this was the only way to do that, because if he had left her body to scrappers or scavengers, like, who knows what would have happened to her, and he's just so heartbroken by it. And at the end of this book, Lando and L3 get to have a conversation after she's already integrated with the Falcon. This is the last time he'll ever get to talk to her, and he tells her, your personality is still here, making you unique among all the ships in the galaxy, and we're still together. My best friend, the best co-pilot ever, is still with me. And L3 reflects, saying, and then they were one, the docile, friendly Falcon, the fiercely independent, brilliant droid, becoming something entirely new and entirely unique. It's celebrated in this way because it is so sad. Like, this is not something that L3 would have wanted. She wouldn't have wanted to be stuck in this ship, to be beholden to captains, to have to go where like other people tell her to go. But it's celebrated. It's treated in a way as like, you get to become something more. You get to live on. You get to do other things. And it just rips rips my heart out, and it makes it so much more tragic that Han gets the Falcon. Like, it is said that like Han loves this ship and L3 recognizes this and that she would love anybody who loves the ship as it deserves, but it is just so sad that it gets taken away from Lando because this is somebody that he clearly cared a lot about, and I really hope in episode 9 we're going to get something about that. Even if it's just a look, even if it's him like in the cockpit just saying like, you know, hello good friend, or just something like that, it would just absolutely rip my heart out and it would be amazing, and I really need that acknowledgement because honestly I know a lot of people don't like L3. I made a video about her on Network 1901 and it got a horrible backlash. People really hate this character, but let me tell you, she is so absolutely needed and necessary and valid, and her story is beautiful, especially in this book. So I absolutely love it, and I'm so glad that we get her, and I really hope we get to see a lot more from her. I also hope we get to see the continuation of Kira's story. I feel like there is so much more to be seen. I really feel like you can draw a direct line from this book to where Han goes throughout the rest of it, because after this, he spends so much of his life always looking over his shoulder, always knowing that he can't trust anybody, always it's just him and Chewie. Chewie's the only one he can rely on. So of course, once the war is over, he's not going to be able to adjust. Of course, he's going to go back to the life that he knew before. Of course, he's not going to be able to stay with Leia and take care of his son. And of course, that's going to weigh on his son for the rest of his life. And it rips my heart out. It's amazing. Mur, you did an absolutely fabulous job. Please write more Star Wars books, and like, please especially write the 9 novelization, because that's all I ever need. But please let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Have you guys read this book? If you haven't, then you're definitely sleeping on it. Do you think we're gonna get to see more of these characters? Just all of that kind of stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to hit that like button down below. Don't forget to subscribe so you can talk books with me every week. That is everything got for today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.